Everyone. I'm Chris Quinn, the president and CEO of WIN, and I want to thank you all, particularly for the fact that you're joining us to have an important conversation at the end of July. So it really speaks to your commitment to the issue of ending family homelessness. And just for anybody who's new to WIN on this webinar, WIN is the largest provider of shelter, transitional housing, to homeless families with children, and we're the largest in the nation. We're also the largest provider of supportive housing, which is permanent housing, but with some services on site, case management, maybe distribution of psychiatric medication, etc. And we're going to talk today about the importance of building or rehabilitating buildings to be shelters for families with children, what we call purpose-built shelter design. And we at WIN, being the national leader, having done this work for 40 years almost, we know that the physical structure we provide services in makes a difference. We all know that the quality of a building, whether it's a school or a hospital or a shelter, sends a message about how we see the people who come to that building for support and the way we hold them, how we regard them. People rise to the standards that are out there. So we at WIN know that therefore it's important to build shelters with a purpose and with an intention to break the cycle of homelessness. We also know that shelters for homeless families, and the other speakers are going to talk a lot more about this. And we have 16 shelters across all 5 boroughs, and many of them are not purpose-built. And this new one we're going to talk about today, Ruby Dee in the Bronx, is not only purpose-built, but it's the first shelter that WIN has designed and built all on its own. But we also know that people who are homeless come to us having experienced great trauma. The 12,400 people who called WIN home last year, homelessness was a trauma, maybe domestic violence, maybe substance misuse, maybe mental illness, maybe sexual violence, and you need to have a space that's designed to help people process that it is what we call trauma-informed. But let me give you the most significant example of what's wrong with our system right now. When a family shelter is built, usually either a rehabbed building or by a for-profit developer or built new by a for-profit developer, there is not the requirement to have a playground. A building for families with children, not a requirement to have a playground. Why does this matter so much? Because children need to play. They need to run about, but also because it has been proven that play helps children process trauma. Again, we know that homelessness in and of itself has a trauma, but also the history of domestic violence with our families. Over 80% of our families say they've experienced domestic violence. The most significant factor of whether someone is a homeless adult is if they were a homeless child. 17% of WIN's adult clients experience some type of shelter or overcrowding as children. So today we're going to see what we should be doing. We're going to see what is really cutting edge, state of the art, clinically on point shelter transitional housing. Now you're going to hear a lot more about this, but the Ruby Dee Family Residence is in the Bronx. We had a shelter on this same site called Powers. It was for a period of time the city's intake center, and intake centers are not welcoming to families. But during Hurricane Sandy, the city asked WIN to do something we don't usually do, to stand up an emergency shelter for people who were displaced because of Hurricane Sandy. We did that, of course. You don't want to say no in a crisis. The city then said, you can have this building. Be careful when the city gives you something for free. It was not an appropriate place. Although our staff, God bless them, made the best of it, it really wasn't an appropriate place. We convinced the city, it took years, it shouldn't have, to sell us the building and the property for $1. We've now built this new, really amazing place that we know is going to have great results for homeless families. And we're also, because there was the shelter and then a large parking lot, going to build right next to it a large, which will be the largest in the country, supportive housing development for homeless families, adding to the already 5 congregate buildings we have and over 200 individual apartments we have for supportive housing. And it's believed that about 30 to 40% of those who families who are in shelter need supportive housing to really thrive. So I'm so excited for you to learn more today. Keep in mind what I said about playgrounds. We have a number of our 16 shelters that still need playgrounds. About a year ago, we got a new playground at our Glenwood shelter in East Flatbush. That cost about $400,000 to put together, which I know sounds like a lot, but there are a lot of rules and regulations, and you really want the playgrounds to be great. So although there are a lot of needs at Wynn, getting some of the 3 or 4 shelters that don't have playgrounds, getting them to have playgrounds is really high on my list. So think about that when you're listening. Think about the difference it can make for children and think about how much you could contribute towards getting more playgrounds. Now, let me just introduce the panelists we're going to hear from today. We're going to hear from Ms. Caro, who is an assistant vice president for transitional housing at Wynn. She's worked in a lot of our different facilities and really has the hands-on experience that really has shaped what we've done at Ruby Dee and shapes what we do every day. We're going to hear from one of our amazing real estate staff, Brennan. He really, at times, unfortunately, has been a one-man show because of different reasons, but he shepherded this project through on budget, on time, which is not anything I can say about the ones that for-profit developers have done, but we're very, very lucky. Brian Fields, who's been just an amazing member of our staff, and we're so lucky to have him. Then we're going to hear from one of our vice presidents, Megan Mellamand, who is our trauma-informed leader, who's really made Wynn cutting edge in this area. She runs, among many other things, our Wynn Academy, which is our training institute for staff, because to best serve the clients, we need to have a well-trained and well-supported staff. I don't think I'm forgetting any of the panelists, but if I did, I apologize. And I'm now going to turn it over to Ms. Caro.
Thank you, Chris. Good morning, everyone. Looking back at our old facility, this building was originally used as the PATH Intake Center, where Hero and DHS processed families before placing them in shelter. It was designed for short-term stays, about 8 hours, not for long-term housing, and certainly not for the needs of families like those that Wynn serve. As a result, the existing layout was never intended to support stable shelter. The space lacked functional kitchenettes, and DHS made only minimal modifications to bring it up to shelter code. There were no dedicated community spaces at the old facility, no playgrounds, no recreation areas, no childcare rooms, not even a security station or a staff bubble to help monitor the activity. The site reflected a system built for institutional efficiency, not for dignity or healing. And this wasn't unique to this site. This is how the system is designed. And we knew we had to build something different, purpose built from the ground up, and here's how we did it. Next slide. I want you to focus on these 2 pictures here in the left. This was the old facility, and the right, the new facility, Ruby Dee. And in the old facility, the picture to your left, this is, it has like an institutionalized feel. It's not as welcoming. As opposed to the new site, it's welcoming, it's more inviting. We have kitchenettes, we have the stove, we have beds, the floor is different, there's more lighting. I'll be passing this over to our manager of real estate, Brandon, who will walk us through the shelter design and the development process.
And I just want to underscore one thing Ms. Caro said, the kitchens. Before this, before it was Ruby Dee, the shelter, the city thought it was okay that people not have the ability to cook their own meals, to eat with their family in their unit, to have their schedule of when they were having meals. Think of what happens in the morning when you're having breakfast with your child. You can have some of the most amazing, insightful moments with your child in that moment. Think if you were robbed of that. At the very time you needed to solidify the unit that is your family. So it may seem small, but it could be life changing. Sorry, Brennan.
No worries. Thank you, Chris, and thanks, Ms. Caro. Hi, everyone. My name is Brennan Fields. I'm the real estate project manager here at Win. And I'm just going to be kind of walking us through some of the design process and building the new shelter here. So as you can see on this page here, this is just some progress photos. And to give some summary of the building, it's about 93,000 square feet. It's got 95 units of, a little bit larger units, studios, ones, twos, and threes. And to build this, it really took everyone. It took regular leadership meetings with all of our executives to guide, trauma-informed color schemes, unit layout, integrate security and programmatic and facility needs. And, it really came together. Calm palettes and consistent lighting throughout, staff spaces designed with visibility and safety in mind, including above grade office spaces, which is something that we get a lot of feedback that is much preferred than being in a cellar or in the basement. And on top of this, it really takes selecting, a good architect and a good general contractor with proven experience in shelter development. There's a lot of requirements for accessibility and compliance, and having, experienced architects and contractors really helps us mitigate any hurdles to overcome throughout the development process. Next slide, please. And here I'll just walk you through some of the progress photos. So this is the front entrance of Ruby Dee. You can see some nice landscaping at the front. And like Ms. Caro said earlier, in this building, when you walk in, there's actually a dedicated security bubble, so it's very secure, there's dedicated spaces. And, as you can see here, we have a nice lobby, good lighting. We have a dedicated, mail room. So it's really come together. Next slide, please. And so here, one of, I think, the biggest highlights of this project is the playground. And it really isn't just the playground that makes this work so well. It's the fact that we have our recreation room and we have childcare right next to it. You can literally walk from childcare through the playground to recreation. It makes for a very cohesive space. Next slide, please. And here, kind of just going off of what I was saying before, dedicated spaces. Here we have a full community room. It has floor to ceiling windows. It has great lighting. We're going to have a nice smart board in there. There's a full kitchen and pantry included. So it's been very exciting getting to see this all come together. Next slide, please. And so here you can see the office spaces. And like I said earlier, again, above grade office spaces, good lighting. We have sunlight. We have sunlights in here too, to provide even extra, just visibility and a bright, calming space. Next slide, please. And so here, just to highlight the units, and I know we kind of pointed to a picture of one of the old units earlier, but, some of the things that, you can't see and you can see in this picture is we have a full, VRF system providing centralized heating and cooling, which we didn't have in the old facility. We have larger unit sizes, less studios, more ones, twos, and threes. We have soft close cabinets in here, so it doesn't make too much noise when you're trying to shut something. And there's even specified units for hearing disabilities and visual impairment.
And the soft close, you have to remember, as nice as these units are, everybody's in one big room. So if you're trying to get your child to sleep, think about when your children were infants and you hear slam, a night could be ruined. In addition to, little ones getting their fingers caught in drawers. So it may seem small, but it actually is critical to allowing the family to function at the highest level. Sorry, Brent.
No worries. Thanks, Chris. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, our VP of Innovative Programs, Megan, to share why these transformations mean so much for families we serve.
Thanks, Brennan. And thank you for that tour. It's truly a beautiful building. I had the opportunity to go there the other day and I was just floored. So I'll talk a little bit about trauma and homelessness and sort of give some background as to why these purpose-built shelters are so important to both our families and our staff. So as many of you may know, trauma is pervasive. 90% of adults in the US report experiencing at least one traumatic incident in their lifetime. For our residents, trauma is rarely a one-time occurrence. It's often complex, repeated, and intergenerational. In fact, the experience of becoming homeless is in and of itself traumatic. Whether it's job loss, domestic violence, fire, or death of a loved one, these experiences, coupled with the loss of stable housing, result in a loss of the feelings of safety, feeling of control, power, and choice. We also know that part of our responsibility in responding to trauma is to be aware of the impact of adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, not just on our residents who are children, but also on the adults, many of whom experienced ACEs as children. We also know that poverty, trauma, and housing instability make the long-term effects of ACEs even worse. These long-term effects can include developmental challenges and chronic physical health conditions. Therefore, trauma in shelter is not an abstract challenge. It shapes how people show up and respond to services. Trauma-informed care is essential, and recognizing the way that racial trauma and structural inequities have shown up in our system and in our systems of care is key to not just transforming lives, but also transforming systems. With trauma-informed care as the foundation, we knew that the physical environment had to support healing, safety, and stability for both our families and our staff. Next slide, please. So we'll take a look at our trauma-informed shelter model. Privacy, accessibility, and safety shape the entire layout, from intake rooms to case management offices. You all saw a picture before of what our old case management offices looked like. They were cramped, the lighting was not great, there wasn't a lot of privacy in which to have really difficult conversations. When we're helping people to move on to housing and to heal some of that trauma that has shaped their journey of homelessness, we're talking to people about some of the most intimate moments of their life, right? Some of the scariest moments of their lives. And having those conversations require private spaces and confidential spaces to have these really sensitive conversations. We also wanted our supportive spaces for our children, as Chris mentioned before, to encourage play and exploration, right? It is so important for children to have both that play and that exploration, but also that safety, right? We want kids who go out and explore and then know that they're coming back to a safe place. So that's really what we tried to do here at our Ruby Dee site. We also wanted to make sure that we were close to public transportation and local schools so that people could come and go. A lot of our families are parents with babies and strollers. Those of you who have been parents to babies in strollers in New York City know how difficult it can be to get kids from A to B. So we really wanted to make sure that our site was accessible and also that we had elevators, right? Nobody wants to schlep a stroller up and down 3, 4, 5 flights of stairs, right? So we have 2 elevators. We have computer rooms for job searches, private computer rooms. We have, I mean, the sunlight in there is truly unreal. So I'm going to pass it over to Miss Caro, actually, who's going to tell us a couple of stories about folks who have moved in and responded to this shelter design.
Thank you, Megan. And since we've been open for a few months now, we're able to see and connect with clients and see how they're feeling. And you're right, Megan, like the office space was very cramped at the old facility. Here now, given the vicarious trauma that clients have experienced, the fact that we have like a private intake room for our intakes and now for one-on-ones with their case managers, they're able to feel more comfortable. As we invested in the new design and construction of this new facility, the goal wasn't just to build something better, it was to truly meet the needs of our clients and exceeds their expectations. So we check in with them regularly to hear how the space is working for them and what kind of impact it's already having. Next slide. So firsthand, in connecting with our clients, we have some testimonials because, it's important to hear how they're feeling. And one father in particular, single father, for Father's Day, he expressed how delighted he was that he was able to prepare his meal in a kitchen for him and his family. Whereas at the old facility, the meals were delivered, and that was truly heartfelt. Another family expressed how they felt about their child being in this new child care recreation space because they weren't aware this was a new intake. It wasn't what they've experienced before in terms of the lighting, the space. Children deserve to be free to run, to be comfortable, and to also be guided. So that was also a heartfelt moment and testimonial. And just in general, our clients that transferred from other facilities that may not have received the care, we're here to meet with them one-on-one to support them. And even though they're only here on a temporary basis, we want to make it worthwhile. I want to transition this back to Megan. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Caro. Um, so of course, creating this healing environment takes more than just this thoughtful design, right? It depends on the people that are inside the sites that are doing the work. And that's why we have Win Academy, to ensure that our staff have the tools, the training, and the support that they need to show up for our families in truly trauma-informed ways. So if you look on the left of this slide, you'll see some quotes from our direct care staff who have gone through Win Academy trainings and support sessions. I love these quotes so much. I can't even express how much they really just sing to my heart. Win Academy is our in-house training department. So we train all of our staff in the implementation of trauma-informed and evidence-based practices. Our security staff, our maintenance staff, our direct care staff, communications, volunteer services, policy. Everybody at WIN has an opportunity to be trained in trauma-informed care. We've actually implemented trauma-informed care training at orientation to make sure that every single person that comes to WIN knows that trauma-informed care is the bedrock of the way that we do things here at WIN. In our Win Academy trainings, we often say to people, every interaction you have with a person is a chance to create safety. It's a chance to change the narrative that a person has about themselves and their feelings of being safe in the world. So this is lovely, right? And the idea of trauma-informed care is wonderful. Putting it into practice is a really, really difficult undertaking. Next slide, please. And so in order to keep our staff as healthy as possible, we really try to create a trauma-informed work environment for them because we know that in order to achieve our goal, achieve our vision, our mission of serving our families, we need to make sure that our staff is taken care of. Our staff is working to support individuals and families that are facing poverty, discrimination, homelessness, trauma, domestic violence, and more. And this is in the face of what we said before, right? Systems that often are not designed to be trauma informed, right? A lot of our systems are inadvertently re-traumatizing, and we have to try, in order to do true trauma informed care, We have to know ways to avoid re-traumatizing people, right? That could be the way that we knock on somebody's door. That could be the way that we ask folks to sign in and sign out. And so we support staff by training staff on trauma-informed care and many different evidence-based practices that fall under that umbrella. We also train staff in transforming burnout. So we talk to staff a lot about feelings of vicarious trauma, feelings of burnout, right? And how you really take care of yourself first. Everybody knows the saying, you can't pour from an empty cup. And that is really true. You really can't, right? So how is staff taking care of themselves and filling their cup? We also instituted mental health days, which allow staff to take days off for their mental health to get a little bit of a rest. We also have a traumatic incident protocol after a traumatic incident on site. We'll follow up with the team through a combination of WIN Academy and employee assistance EAP, I couldn't think of, employee assistance support. And then we do monthly case conferencing at all of the sites. So our residents are facing a lot of challenges, and we get the whole team together to talk about how do we take different lenses to the challenges that people are facing and really support them from a trauma-informed way. I'll also highlight the physical design for staff. Our new site, again, is so beautiful. There's a roof space. It's filled with greenery where staff can go and they can take a break. I mean, I might just go there from State Street today. I'm not going to, but I want to. It is so gorgeous. It is bright. It is sunny. When I was there the other day, the maintenance manager was like, we should have every party here. This is so beautiful. And it truly is. So the reason why it's so important to have these spaces for staff, to have these well-lit spaces dedicated to case conferencing, to relaxation, is because it elevates the professionalism of their roles, right? As we said yesterday, not a lot of people got into direct care work for the money, right? And so typically these jobs carry a connotation of I don't even know how to say it, but I'll just say that I know some of my first jobs in this field were working in the basement and the sub basements, right? And when we create these spaces, these beautiful offices for our staff, we show them that we appreciate the importance of the work that they do every day. So, well, phase one of this build of Ruby Dee laid the foundation for a more dignified and trauma-informed shelter experience. Phase two builds on that momentum with even more intentional design for healing and connection. I'm going to turn it back over to Brennan, who's going to give us a preview of what's next.
Thank you, Megan. So I just want to give a quick overview of what's going to be the phase two of this project. So where the previous facility was going to be, we're going to be demolishing that and building 232 units of supportive housing. And we really just want to keep building on what we did in the phase one, with a continued focus on healing-centered family-first design, new playgrounds, outdoor spaces, teen rooms. We want to really just hit on everything that we did on the phase one and continue to build there. So we're actually looking to close on our financing for this project in December of this year and hoping to start construction, start the demolition in January. And we'll be expecting an opening hopefully sometime in 2027. So, with phase two, we're continuing to create these spaces with healing, dignity, and community and built into the design. But none of this really happens without support, To walk us through some of the specific ways to get involved and help bring these spaces to life, I'm going to pass it back over to our CEO, Chris Quinn.
Thank you, Ms. Caro and Megan and Brennan very much for your presentation, but more significantly for all the work you have done for a really long time to make this a reality, to make it so that WIN's families are really uplifted and given everything they need to thrive living independently once they leave WIN. So, it wouldn't be a WIN event if I didn't ask you to contribute more than you have already contributed. Typically, it costs about $17 million or so to build a purpose-built shelter. Brennan, if any of my numbers are wrong, jump in. And we were able to do this project because we didn't have to buy the land or buy the building. We got it because it was city-owned from the city for $1. We have one other city-owned building in East Harlem. We're going to make that, just for a host of different reasons, all permanent housing. We'd like to do more purpose-built shelters. The city has a startup fund that we can get $3 million from. So if anyone is listening and wants to make a $14 million contribution, we will take it. Now, that said, I know that may not be the case. We still have about 3 or 4 shelters that are in need of playgrounds. We did one, as I said, about a year ago. That cost us about $400,000. Some will be less than that, maybe 300. Some might be a little bit more. So that is one area where you really could help. And if you can't do the whole $300,000 or $400,000, which we totally understand, a contribution towards a playground, we can piece it together. And of course, there are both individual purpose, individual and corporate naming opportunities for playgrounds, as there was for the one that was built. Now, we also really believe murals are a critical thing, to have murals and public art in our spaces. We have public art all throughout the city. It really brightens and sends messages that are uplifting, and you can include the children in the mural process. We have a mural, for example, at our Junius and Liberty shelters. It is kind of an art. 1/3 of it is where the children came from. 1/3 of it is where the children are. 1/3 of it is where they believe they're going in permanent housing. You see in the first part, sometimes kittens or dogs, because they couldn't take their pets with them. Over the middle part, which is shelter, they wanted to put crowns so people knew it wasn't a bad place. To do a mural costs anywhere, depending on, the artist we engage and how much the children are involved, somewhere between $5,000 and $15,000. Again, if you can't do it all, a contribution towards a mural and public art would make a big difference. The trauma-informed colors that we talked about, those have been studied by psychologists. They're proven to make a difference. We want to beautify the sites that have not been purpose-built. Some of our shelters are renovated other buildings. Beautification through painting and sometimes landscaping is about $2,500 to $5,000. That makes a big difference. Let me tell you, when I walk into one of our shelters that has not yet been beautified, it makes me sad. No one wants me to be sad. Please, let's come forward with that. Lastly, we have a partnership, and you can see part of it in the circle where there's a blue and green and many color picture on the wall. Anyway, we have a partnership with the Children's Museum of Manhattan, where we're installing learning hubs in shelter. We just had a ribbon cutting in Brooklyn 2 or 3 weeks ago. These learning hubs are interactive. They target different age groups. They're really amazing. And the Children's Museum of Manhattan are the experts in this area. We would like to have those learning hubs in each one of our shelters. A learning hub, depending on how big the shelter is anywhere from $25,000 to $50,000. We really there. And if you're thinking of it, let's take you out to Shirley Chisholm Shelter in Brooklyn, and we will show you it, and you will be sold. I said lastly, but I lied. Brandon mentioned teen lounges. Look, if any of you have teenagers, you get it. They need a space. They need a space, and they don't have a bedroom where they can close the, slam the door and be in that room alone. Teen rooms are about $100,000 to create, but they really make a difference in helping our kids. You know how hard it is to be a teenager. For $1 million, I wouldn't go back to that time in my life. But to do that, think of it, you don't have a room separate from your mom or dad, separate from your siblings. It really makes a big difference. So if any or all of this is interesting to you, please just reach out to Chris Valens, our Senior Vice President for Development, and we can get you more info, get you a tour. It really could change, particularly a child's life, if you're able to help us move forward with more playgrounds, with beautification, with murals, with teen lounges, and with the most fun learning hubs you will have ever seen. So all of that said, start emailing Chris Valens. It's cvalens@winnyc2ns.org. And now we're going to take some questions and hopefully give you good answers. Okay, the first question is for Brennan. Can you share more about the logistical barriers to developing trauma-informed shelters?
Yeah, I think I think probably the biggest one we tend to point to is, in our for-profit developments, or not our for-profit, I'm sorry, in our partnerships with other owners, we don't really get a choice in the architect and the contractor, and I think that can tend to lead us to not design these spaces specifically for how we want, so I think being a self-developed, self-owned building, we were able to choose everything. We had full control over the design process, so it made it work a lot more seamlessly than a project we would do with another owner. So I think that's probably the biggest hurdle I would point to. But
And one of the other challenges is, when a for-profit developer builds a shelter, although as Brendan, indicated, we give input and force input on. But the places where a for-profit developer, how they make their investment back is based on the rent payment. Rent payment is based on how many units there are, how many people are sleeping there every night. So they're not particularly interested in building a lot of extra counseling rooms. They're not interested in building playgrounds or even making the security bubble as big as it should be. And if you don't feel safe, you cannot heal. So one of the other challenges is that the city relies mostly on for-profit developers and us having to fight with them to do the right thing. If we had resources to say to them, here's X money to pay for the playground, then we would be more likely to get them to do the playground. Okay, so speaking of playgrounds, there's a question about are our playgrounds available all day? Is it only used as part of childcare or daycare? Also curious about how you use the community room. Let me start with the community room and then I'll throw it over to either Ms. Carroll or Megan to talk about the playground. But anyway, the community room is, it's why you would like in a perfect world to have more than one. When I got my first tour of the finished Ruby Dee, Brennan said, this is the second community room. I literally almost fell over. That's such a luxury. Because a community room, you might have a job training program in there. For a while, we were doing trainings on food handler licenses. You might have that in there. We have a program right now where we're training clients to become baristas, and then they get placed in corporate cafeterias. You might have that going on. You might have, which I did once in the community room at East River, a luau going on with the children where, they're doing limbo and wearing leis and dancing and in big Ziploc bags, making ice cream, learning about science and how chemicals interact with each other. You might have what Google helps us do, a computer and office skills training program. So it's an array of things that could be going on. And like any multi-use room, there's calendars and scheduling that I'm sure is not always full. You might have yoga. We did yoga a lot for a while. So anyway, we just schedule it and try to make it work and make sure we're hitting all of the different groups, age groups, need groups that exist. But now I'm going to turn it over to either Ms. Carroll or Megan, whoever wants to take it, to talk about how the playgrounds work.
I can start, Ms. Caro, if you want to fill in, let me know. So the playground is open. Well, first of all, we have two playgrounds, which is very exciting. We have a playground for our childcare, so that's 0 to 4, and then for recreation, which is 5 and above. So these playgrounds are specifically purpose-built for children of those age groups. And they're open to children who, during childcare and rec, there's supervision. We also have a lot of events in our sites. So we have Camp Win, which is during the summer or on any school break, and children can use the playground, obviously, during Camp Win. We also, like I said, have a lot of events. So we have family barbecues. We have block parties. And so the playgrounds they're open to all of our families, depending sort of on the situation. Ms. Caro, anything to add?
Yeah, just to add, everything is better in color. So when it comes to the aesthetics and just how everything looks, it's so bright, it's colorful, and it's just super exciting. I've participated in those Win events and with Camp Win, and just seeing the smile on children's faces and how like organized and how we bring like our own community together from other sites. That's just it speaks volumes on, our efforts and how inclusive we are. Thank
And I
you.
can't believe I forgot to mention Camp Win. And as Megan said, Camp Win is all summer. Any day school isn't in session, we have Camp Win, and it is a STEAM-based camp. One of my great Win memories is I was out visiting a shelter, and it was a school vacation day, and there was a young boy playing with Lego. And I said, "Oh, you're playing with Lego." And he looked at me and literally like put his hands on his hips and said, "I am engineering." So he put me in my place. Our next question is going to go to Megan, and it's, what are your employee benefits to ensure that your staff are getting the support they need to take care of themselves in high stress, high trauma environments?
Okay, great question. Thank you. So we have like I mentioned before, we have access to an employee assistance program. So the employee assistance program is available to all employees and any member of doesn't even be a family member, anybody who lives with them. So we also have access to group sessions through our EAP. So a member or a licensed clinician from the employee assistance program will and has come out to our sites to follow up after a traumatic incident. We take those really seriously. We know that vicarious trauma can affect staff just like real trauma affects people, and the repercussions of that can be things like nightmares, lack of focus, hyper focus, right? And so we want to make sure that we're talking to staff and really educating staff. I think psychoeducation is a huge part of helping staff understand what it means to be working in these really complex, high trauma environments. We also, like I said before, we have mental health days, and we have a really generous vacation paid time off package that we encourage staff to use. When folks have witnessed a traumatic incident, any member of their leadership team will call them and say, you tell us what you need, right? We'll encourage people to take days off. We want to make sure that our staff stay, right? We want to make sure that we have good, productive staff who want to stay here at Win. And in order to do that, we need to be really realistic about what they're facing.
I
Thank
also want
you,
to,
Megan. Oh, go ahead, Ms. Carol.
yeah,
No,
I
sorry.
just also want to add, we also provide maternity leave and also with free therapy through our Win insurance. It's also at a low cost. Hmm?
And
I
I
just
to add that recently myself and our head of HR have been for basically like the past year going out and doing listening tours where we've gone to every shelter and heard feedback from staff. And one of the things we heard, a woman said, "I just got off from maternity leave, and the maternity leave process," and I said, "I'm pretty sure you're not going to say was fabulous." And she said no. And based on her feedback, we greatly expanded our paternity leave. We also felt that people felt the days we had for bereavement were not enough. We added to the bereavement days. And although we have a pretty extensive paid time off, we didn't have any days that were specific for mental health days, as Megan, I believe, mentioned. And so we added that in. We're still doing listening tours. And once we finish all the sites, we'll whip back around and start again. So that's a way to make sure we're hearing directly from staff about what they need to feel more support. We have a question: are all Win shelters built like Ruby Dee? I wish. We have an array of different types of sites. So we have, I think, 3 or 4 sites that were built by for-profit developers with Win's input. Those are certainly a step in the right direction, but they're not, there may be, I don't know, Brandon, would you agree with this? Like 60% of a Ruby Dee or 50% of a Ruby Dee. We have a couple of facilities owned by the same gentleman, which are converted. So we have 2 buildings in Brooklyn. I'm smiling because they were tank factories. These are big hulking buildings, There are about 230 units. We won't do shelters over 200 anymore. That actually work. I mean, it's a rehab, but they're big spaces, so it actually works. Both of them work pretty well, and we have units there that are larger, so we have some of the big families there. We have a building in East Harlem that's a converted school. That's kind of nice in a way because on the block it looks like it's a school. It doesn't look like it's a shelter or anything. And that is a space. I mean, it has some challenges, but it works, pretty well. It is in need of beautification. So if you live in the East Harlem area, you could make a neighborhood contribution. We have another shelter in East Harlem that's 5 tenements strung together. The units are good because they're apartments, but quite frankly, it doesn't work that well. You have to have 5 security bubbles, 5 this, 5 that. That Jenny A. Clark is the other city-owned site that we're going to convert that to permanent housing. So we have an array of different adaptive reuses and purpose-built, and we're trying in the ones that were built by for-profits and in the adaptive reuse to do everything we can through murals, learning hubs, beautification, to make them as trauma-informed and as Ruby Dee-like as possible. We have a question from Ms. Caro, who's been so great on this webinar. What is your favorite part of the Ruby Dee facility?
I love the laundry room and the office space.
There you go. I love a
So
laundry room.
yeah, the laundry room, it has like marble walls. It's a luxury, right, to have laundry. So the fact that clients are able to experience that and have their own cards and load their cards and do their laundry, it's just the little things, right, that we could oftentimes take for granted. So definitely the laundry room and program services, simply because that's where the heart is, in terms of, the team, all the effort, all the guidance, and all the support that they put into the work. So just seeing like everyone in action and supporting each other with housing, the clinical care coordinators, clinical directors, case managers, and the program director, just everyone. It's a one-stop shop.
Thank you. Well, we have time for one more question. So our last question will be, what is the priority funding need for making trauma-informed sites? The priority funding need is the playgrounds and putting funds together to get playgrounds in the 3 or so sites that do not have playgrounds. Some of them are close to parks, so we do get there, but some are not. So really getting all the sites to have playgrounds, and it just galls me that it's not a requirement, but that is our big priority, and we will follow up with folks about that for sure. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Ms. Caro. Thank you, Brennan. Thank you, Megan. Thank you, Lily and Millie and Alachi, who helped us pull this together. I hope you all have a great and fun and happy and safe rest of your summer. And I'm sure we will see you at a WIN event or a WIN family residence sometime soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.